everyone. Today I'll be covering Ind AS 37 provisions, contingent liabilities and contingent assets. I know I'm late, many of you requested for this video long ago. So anyhow, we'll directly jump into the topic. So this is the unit overview. Basically, we'll be covering recognition measurement, which is common to every Ind AS. Then there is a concept of reimbursement, change and use of provisions, application of the recognition and measurement rules, and lastly disclosure. So under recognition there are provisions and contingencies for us. So we'll cover provision, then contingent liability and contingent asset, as well as all other topics covered here. So firstly, the objective of the Ind AS is to ensure that appropriate recognition and measurement principles are applied and sufficient information is disclosed. That is of no use. Now second thing is the scope. So scope I have cut here because we'll cover scope from this chart, which depicts it very clearly. So Ind AS 37 firstly is not applying to financial instruments including guarantees within the scope of Ind AS 109. So it does not apply to financial instruments. Secondly, it does not apply to these items which are covered specifically under separate Ind AS. And third, it does not apply to executory contracts. Now under executory contracts, which we'll cover later, there is a concept of onerous contracts. So Ind AS 37 is applicable to onerous contracts, but it is not applicable to those executory contracts which are not in the nature of onerous contracts. And coming to the second point, so Ind AS 37 does not apply where Ind AS 115, Ind AS 12, Ind AS 116, Ind AS 19, Ind AS 104, Ind AS 103 applies. So this is the applicability of Ind AS 37, and under Ind AS 116 leases, here there is given a further detail that firstly Ind AS 37 is not applicable to leases, of that we are clear. Now if the lease contract becomes onerous contract before the commencement of the lease, in that case we can apply Ind AS 37 on such an onerous contract. And secondly, if the condition is that the lease is of short term lease or it has an underlying asset which is of low value, that is a low value asset lease, in these two cases Ind AS 37 will be applicable if the contract is onerous. The reason here is that in case of short term leases and low value asset leases, Ind AS 116 cannot be applied. It is specifically covered by me in Ind AS 116 video also. So in that case, if such a contract is onerous, then in that case we can apply Ind AS 37. So this was a basic applicability. Now jumping to executory contracts. See, outrightly if I say, then Ind AS 37 is not applicable to executory contracts. So firstly we'll have to understand what is executory contract. So executory contract means any contract which is not a complete contract. Now if it is not complete, that means that the contract is either not started, or if started it is only partially completed. So in that case we have to observe that both the parties should be at equal footing. So what the definition says here is that either none of the parties have performed their obligations, so both are at zero, or if both the parties have partially performed, then that should be to an equal extent. That is, if the contract is for, let's say, 100% contract, then both the parties have either performed 0%, or if partially, then maybe like 40% each. So the extent of performance should be equal but not complete. In that case, executory contract is formed. So executory, as the word suggests, a contract which has not been completed, which is yet to be executed fully. So it is executory. So in case of executory contracts, Ind AS 37 is not applicable. But if the executory contract is of onerous nature, in that case Ind AS 37 will be applicable. So here the note says the same thing and examples have been given. So for example, if I'll give a separate example, if I'm selling my phone to you, in that case what are the obligations? I have to give you my phone and you have to give me the payment. And if I say that in case you are not giving me the payment, there shall be a penalty. So this penalty clause can make the contract onerous. I'll cover this later on in this video. So in such a case, if I have not given my phone to you and if you have not given me the payment, the contract is of an executory nature. So in that case, outrightly we cannot say Ind AS 37 will be applicable. But if there is a penalty clause which makes the contract onerous contract, in that case there might be a case where Ind AS 37 shall be applicable to such a contract. Second, 2.2.2 says provisions when relate to the recognition of revenue or expense loss. This is of no use. Now we'll move on to the second part, definitions. Till now we have covered the applicability of Ind AS 37. So definitions, there are 9 definitions here, but I have broken down and I've made them into 4 definitions. So the first definition is basically a chain of definitions. How? I'll just show you. So first definition is of provision. So provision is a liability of an uncertain timing or amount. Now whatever things I have highlighted, I'd like it if you would highlight the same, because these are nothing but the key words, key points which will help us to later on recognize what is a provision, what will be a contingent asset and what will be a contingent liability. So provision has 2 components. First is a liability and second is uncertain timing or uncertain amount. Now what does a liability mean? Liability is nothing but a present obligation arising out of past event which will result in an outflow of entity's economic benefits, which is expected to result in an outflow of entity's economic resources. So there are 3 components. First is a present obligation, second is past event, and third is outflow of resources. Now if I say past event, then past event should be such an event which is an obligating event. So what is an obligating event? Obligating event is any event which creates either a legal obligation or a constructive obligation, and for which entity has no realistic alternative to settling than that obligation. So entity has no other option but it has to settle that obligation, and therefore it is an obligating event. And such an obligating event, if it had occurred in the past, would become a past event, and because of that we might have a present obligation which will result in a liability, and if such a liability is of uncertain timing and amount, then it will be called a provision. So this is like a chain. Now in obligating event, I have identified 2 components. First is a legal or constructive obligation, and second is no realistic alternative to settling that obligation. Now obligation therefore can be of 2 kinds, legal or constructive. So what is a legal obligation? As the name suggests, it will arise out of a legislation or law or any contract. So it is a legal. But if it is other than this, that is, it will be covered under a constructive obligation. So for constructive obligation, we have 2 points, that the constructive obligation arises out of the entity's past practice, and it results in a valid expectation on the part of the other parties. So an example of constructive obligation is generally used the pollution of a river. So let's say if a company is polluting a river nearby, and the company as a past practice always cleans up the river in every 5 years. So it is a past practice to clean the river, and also it announces that it will clean the river, and all the villagers have therefore a valid expectation that the entity will clean the river. The employees have a valid expectation that the entity will clean the river. Therefore both the conditions are satisfied, and therefore the entity or the company has to observe a constructive obligation here, which might result into a liability for which the entity might have to recognize a provision depending on other factors. So this was the first chain. I'll recapitulate it. So a provision has 2 components, liability and uncertain timing or amount, and liability has 3 components, present obligation, past event and outflow of resources. Now past event can be any obligating event, and such an obligation can be either legal or constructive, and for such an event the entity has no realistic alternative other than to settle that obligation. Now legal obligation has 3 components, either contract, legislation or operation of law, and on the other hand constructive obligation has 2 components, past practice and valid expectation in the mind of users. So these 5 definitions I had clubbed into one because of the chain, as you just saw. Now we'll cover the second or the 6th actually definition of contingent liability. Just took a tea break anyways. Let's proceed. So contingent liability again has 2 kinds of liabilities. See, firstly it can be a possible obligation out of past events, and possible obligations means any obligation whose existence will be confirmed only by the occurrence or non-occurrence of one or more uncertain future events which are not within the control of the entity. See, these all things you have to memorize because it is easy, and you have to memorize because you might have to reproduce the same in the exams. So possible obligation which arises out of past events. Now possible obligations means it depends on the occurrence or non-occurrence of events, and such events shall not be in the control of the entity, not in the control of the entity. Now second can be, this is or, so this is not and. Either it can be a possible obligation or it can be a present obligation. See, but if it is a present obligation out of past events, then how do we differ between a liability and a contingent liability, or to say between a provision and a contingent liability? So the differentiating factor here is this 2 points. If it is a present obligation arising out of past events, so it is not recognized because it is not probable that there is an outflow of resources, either this or that the amount of obligation cannot be measured reliably. So there are two components. I'll again say these things. See, if a contingent liability is there, so how do we identify it? Either there is a possible obligation, where when I use the word possible, it means that it is dependent on certain factors, certain events, which if occur or do not occur will result in the obligation, and such factors shall not be within the control of the entity wholly. First this. So for the B point, we'll again see both the definitions. See, in case of a liability, there are three components: present obligation, past event, and outflow of economic resources. So if in these three components the outflow of economic resources is not probable, then it is a contingent liability, and if the outflow of economic resources is probable, then it is a liability which can lead to a provision. And if there is a probability of outflow of economic resources, but if those resources, those outflow cannot be measured reliably, then we cannot recognize a provision in our books, because we do not know what is the actual amount, what is the amount that the provision should be measured at. So in that case, again we recognize a contingent liability. I hope I am clear with this. And similar definition is of contingent asset. Again here we have only one classification. See, under the contingent liability we had two classifications, A and B, but in case of contingent asset there is only the A part and not the B part. How? See, in case of a contingent asset, there is a possible asset arising from past events, and again the same thing, occurrence or non-occurrence of one or more uncertain events not wholly within the control of the entity. So again here there are three components. There is a possible asset arising out of past event, and such events are not within the control of the entity, and the possible asset obviously depends on the occurrence or non-occurrence of such events. Now I'll move to the last two definitions. First is of onerous contracts. Earlier I have covered the definition of executory contracts. So onerous contracts are nothing but those contracts in which the unavoidable cost of meeting the obligations exceed the economic benefits expected to be received under it. I'll give you a very simple example. See, if we both enter into a contract and I'm going to sell you my phone for, let's say, 15,000 rupees, and I put a penalty such that if you do not buy the phone from me at the specified date, you will have to pay a penalty of 18,000 rupees. So this is an example of, very easy example of onerous contracts, whereby the unavoidable of cost of meeting the obligation is 18,000 rupees, and if you perform the contract, perform the obligation, then the economic benefit you receive is of only 15,000 rupees. That is, the cost is higher than the benefit, and therefore it is an onerous contract. So if it is an onerous contract, then Ind AS 37 is applicable, and if it is not an onerous contract but merely an executory contract, in that case Ind AS 37 is not applicable. While covering this video, I think this video will be a bit longer because there are many things to explain, so bear with me. Now the last definition is of restructuring. So restructuring is a program that is planned and controlled by the management and materially changes. See, the change should be material and not insignificant, either the scope of the business or the manner in which the business is conducted. So that is restructuring. We are covering restructuring because later on there will be a topic on provision for restructuring costs. So that is why the definition of restructuring is given here. Okay, so this covers our definition part. I know it was a bit clumsy, but anyhow we have to cover it, and we have to focus on the points which I have highlighted, because these keywords, these key points will be of very important essence when you cover this in Ind AS 37. Okay, now next topic is of provision and other liabilities. So this is nothing but again an extension of the definition we've covered above. Basically it is the differentiation between the first and second definition. So provision is a bigger term, liability is just a subset of provision. Like if I see the definition of provision, provision is nothing but provision equals to liability plus either uncertain timing or uncertain amount. So it is again highlighting that point here, that there is an uncertainty about the timing or amount of future expenditure when we talk about provision as compared to liabilities. And it gives examples of liabilities like trade payables and accruals. So this is nothing and it is insignificant part, basically just the extension of definition. Now this point is pretty good, relationship between provision and contingent liabilities, and basically in this Ind AS 37 what I think is many people will get confused between these two things. When should an entity recognize it as a provision and when should it recognize it as a contingent liabilities, although we've covered some part of it in the definition, whereby I'm recalling that part, that in case of provision there is an outflow of economic resources, there is a present obligation and past event. But in case of contingent liabilities, there can be a possible obligation due to occurrence or non-occurrence of events not wholly within the control of entity, or like provisions, there can again be a present obligation arising due to past events. But in that case, there are two subsets, either the outflow of economic resources is not probable, or if it is probable, then it cannot be measured reliably. So these were the basic distinction criteria. So it here highlights that provisions are recognized as liabilities and contingent liabilities are not recognized as liabilities. See, this we have done in CPT IPCC also. Provisions are always recognized in balance sheet and contingent liabilities are just disclosed in the footnotes. So it is again highlighting those definitions and the recognition part. Now we'll move to the actual recognition part of each of these items which we have covered above. Now let's first recapitulate what we have covered till now. The objective, the scope of Ind AS and the definitions. Then we had some minor topics which we have covered, and now we are moving on to the recognition part. So as I was saying, there are components. See, ICI is also given a diagram in the same format. So when to recognize a provision, that is, what is the definition of provision? Present obligation. Obligation may be legal or constructive. As a result of past event, there is an outflow of resources and reliable estimate should be made. See, if there is no probable outflow, then again it is a contingent liability. Or let's say if there is a probable outflow of resources but the reliable estimate cannot be made, again then it is a contingent liability. Simple as that. Now what we are doing is we will talk more on each of these components. So the first component was there should be a present obligation. So present obligation, for that it is saying that in general it is always clear that there is a present obligation, but if it is not clear whether there is a present obligation, then you should reevaluate your past events. Theoretical point. Now in such a case, an entity shall take into account all the available evidences and any additional evidences provided by events after the reporting period. Events after the reporting period basically are covered under Ind AS 10. So it says that if, for example, 31st March 2020 and if after 31st March 2020 there is any event occurring which might lead us to understand whether there is a present obligation, in that case we will cover those events too for the understanding of whether there is a present obligation. And if on the basis of such evidence where it is probable that a present obligation exists, then we'll recognize a provision, and if it is not probable that present obligation exists, that means there might be a possible obligation, therefore it will be a contingent liability. Simple. Now next part is of past events. See, we have covered the first part, present obligation, which will arise due to past event. So now we are covering past event. So past event, we'll just cover the examples because I've cut all those insignificant parts. So past event means, for example, if I'm selling you my phone, then only there will be a warranty provision. So the original sale is a past event which will lead to a present obligation, that is the warranty provision. The original contamination of land would lead to the provision for contamination of land. The oil rig when built will lead to the provision for dismantling or cleaning the oil rig. So any of the past event will lead to a present obligation. Simple as that. Now if it is only these obligations arising from past events existing independently of an entity's future actions, that should be recognized as provisions. See, this is a good point. I'll explain you why. So for this I will jump to an illustration given by ICI. Let me find it. Okay, this one, illustration 1. X Shipping Limited is required by law to overhaul its shipping fleet once in every 3 years. So here we see that there is a requirement to overhaul its shipping fleet once in every 3 years. and the company's finance team view was of the view that recognizing the cost only when paid would prevent matching of revenue earned all the time with certain cost of large amounts which are incurred occasional. Thereby, it has formulated an accounting policy. This is the accounting policy that it provides in its books of accounts for the future cost of maintenance by calculating rate per hour sailed on sea and accumulating a provision over time. The provision is adjusted when expenditure is actually incurred. Is the accounting policy of X Limited correct? So when I see the question prima facie, I also agree that the accounting policy is correct. But because of this point which I just highlighted, this point makes the answer different. See, I'll read the point again. It is only those obligations arising from past events existing independently of an entity's future action. It is saying that the obligation should arise of those events which are not influenced by entity's future course of actions. Only then you should recognize the provision. See, in the illustration 1. So in illustration 1, if I apply that point, I can think that if, for example, X Shipping Limited stops its shipping fleet by, let's say, selling the ships. In that case, if it has sold the ships, it will not be required to overhaul its ships because there are no ships. So this point means that it can avoid the overhauling obligations by simply selling the ships. Therefore, the obligation is dependent on the future course of action. And if it is dependent on future course of action, if it can be changed due to future course of action, if it can be influenced due to future course of action, in that case, no provision shall be recognized. So therefore, it says that the company could avoid the future expenditure by its actions, for example, by selling the ships. Therefore, no provision is recognized to be that need to be incurred to operate the future. And also it says that X Limited should apply the component approach, which I have covered under Ind AS 16 video. So now jumping back to the point. So this point is covered by illustration 1. You can write here, refer illustration 1. Now next point, entity can avoid the future expenditure by future actions. In such case, no present obligation exists. There is a past event but no present obligation because the obligation can be avoided by change in course of action, by change in method of operation. So simple as that. These are certain examples for your reference, and these are of the similar nature. That's why I'm not covering each and every example. For example, I've covered all the illustrations in this video. I will be covering all the illustrations in this video. So for example, I will be covering all the illustrations in this video and some examples, and the remaining examples you'll have to do it by yourself. Now moving on, we are still in the definition of past events. We have covered present obligation and we are covering past events. An obligation always involves another party to whom the obligation is owed. It is not necessary, however, to know the identity. There should be a counterparty, but the identity is of no importance. Now this is saying about the constructive obligation, that a management or a board decision in itself is not a constructive obligation, because it means that there is a constructive obligation had two components. First was established pattern of past practice or published policy, sufficiently specific current statement, etc. But the second component was of a valid expectation. So in this point, what it says that if management or board has taken a decision, it cannot be in itself considered as a constructive obligation unless and until it creates a valid expectation in the mind of the users. So that was a simple point. Now next point, where details of proposed new law has yet to be finalized, an obligation would arise only when the legislation is virtually certain to be enacted as drafted. See, many a times an entity may be required to make new provisions because of change in laws. Now change in laws, for example, if any minister initiates a bill, should that be recognized as a law? Or when it is in the lower house of the parliament, should it be recognized as a law? Or when it is in the upper house of the parliament, then it should be recognized as law. So it is on a, we cannot say anything concretely. Basically, whenever it is virtually certain to be enacted, in that case, we can say that there is a proposed new law for which we might have to make a provision under this Ind AS. So virtually certain is an important word here. If there is a virtual certainty of the enactment, in that case a provision might be required, but if there is no virtual certainty, in that case provision might not be required. Now there is another illustration, illustration 2. Let's cover this. X Chemical Limited is operating in the vicinity of river since 20 years. Okay, this will be basically the river example which I covered earlier. So it says that a community living near X Chemical Limited claims that its operation has caused contamination. X Chemical Limited has received a notice from the governmental environmental agency that official investigation shall be made. The notice is not for payment of any penalty, but it is basically a notice for investigation. So is there any present obligation? That is the question here. So this point satisfies us to the fact that there is no present obligation but only a possible obligation. Now secondly, there is a past event. The past event is the contamination of river, but whether there is a present obligation, no. So because there is only a possible obligation, we will recognize a contingent liability rather than a provision for the pollution of river. So we have covered two components of provision. First was a present obligation, second was a past event. Now the third component is outflow of economic resources, or in the longer term, probable outflow of resources embodying economic benefits. So if the outflow of economic resources is probable, only then we'll recognize a provision. If it is not probable, then they will recognize a contingent liability. And here the point, it is giving a separate point. So for example, I am a phone dealer and I sell you phones. I sell other customers phones. You take hundreds of phones, someone takes 50 phones, and so on. So if I am dealing in mass, there are a similar number of obligations. So if there are similar obligations, then I should consider making the provision, in this case the provision for warranty, by considering the class of obligations as a whole. I should consider all the obligations as a whole rather than individually determining for each sale contract, each sale of each phone. So this was a basically class of obligation should be taken when we are dealing in similar number of obligations. So you can see this example. Now the fourth and last point of the provision was a reliable estimate of the obligation should be made. So whenever there is a point of reliable estimate, in most of the Ind-AS, basically the range of outcomes concept is used. Range of outcomes concept is nothing but there are multiple outcomes given to us in the question, and we have to identify either the average of those or use the probability weighted average and so on. So this is the range of possible outcomes, and we have to make an estimate of the reliable estimate of the obligation. So we'll do illustration 3. X Limited has entered into an agreement with selling agent Y, in accordance with which X Limited has to pay a base percentage of commission on export sales, and an additional commission is to be paid if the export incentives are received. As per the accounting policy, it recognizes export incentive when actually realized. On account of uncertainty in realizing such incentives, export incentives have not been received for 2000 X1 and X2. However, X Limited is hopeful of receiving the export incentives in the next year. In the financial statements of 2000 X1 X2, should it provide for both base and additional commission. So for the base commission, what we see that base commission is dependent on export sales, and in this case we are talking about 2000 X1 X2. Now export sales have been made as of 2000 X1 X2, therefore it is a past event, and the base percentage of commission has to be paid on it, therefore there is a present obligation. So because both present obligation and past event is there, and also economic resources will flow in the form of commission, and thus that commission can be measured because it is a certain percentage of sale amount. Therefore all the four components are there, so we'll recognize a provision for the base percentage. But when I come to the additional commission, so in case of additional commission, is there a present obligation? No, because there is no event. The event will be occurring in the next year, and if export incentives will be received in the next year, it will be recognized only when it is received. So actually there is no present obligation, there is no event which has occurred to give rise to that obligation, and therefore we can recognize no provision for any additional commission. So I hope this is clear. Now I'll move on to the further topic. So up till now we have covered the topic of provision, and this is summarizing the recognition of provision. There should be a present obligation, there should be a past event, outflow of resources, and a reliable estimate to recognize a provision. If any of this is not available, we will not recognize a provision in that case. So you can take a break here. We'll resume with contingent liabilities. Okay, so back from break. Now I'm pretty sure everybody of you might be well aware with the concept of contingent liabilities. So now it will be a very easy ride for us. So firstly, contingent liabilities are not recognized, they are only disclosed. But here there is a new line which I like to put into notice. If the possibility of outflow of resources embodying economic benefits is not remote, only then it is disclosed. If the possibility of the outflow of economic resources is remote, then contingent liability shall not be disclosed. So this is a new factor which we have to check, that whether the outflow of economic resources, the possibility of that is remote or not. If it is remote, then even the contingent liability is not disclosed. Now a new thing, if there are multiple entities and the entity is jointly and severally liable for an obligation with the other entities, so it will have to do two things. Like let's say there is an possible obligation of I'm putting a figures here, let's say of 1000 rupees, and the entity has a 20% share in it. So out of 1000, 200 rupees will be the entity's liability, and entity might recognize a provision for it, and for the rest 800, if the other entities do not pay, only in that case the entity will have to pay. So for the rest 800, this point says that the part of obligation that is expected to be met by the other party should be recognized as contingent liability. That is, 800 should be recognized as contingent liability and 200 as provision. So this might be a certain scenario which might arise out of the third point. Fourth point says the entity should recognize a provision for the part of obligation for which outflow of economic resources is probable, except where no reliable estimate can be made. We know this point, that if a reliable estimate can be made, then it's a provision. If it cannot be made, then it's a contingent liability. And the fifth point says that if there is a contingent liability, continuous assessment has to be made. Why are we making continuous assessment? Because contingent liability was recognized because the outflow of economic resources was not probable or no reliable estimate could be made. Now, because we are making continuous assessment, we might come to a situation where the outflow of economic resources might become probable or the estimate can be made. And if the condition change, in that case, instead of the contingent liability, we might have to recognize a provision in our books. So this is what the fifth point was saying. Now this table is giving a case to case scenario. So see, here there is past event and there may be an outflow of economic resources. So if there is a present obligation, in that case provision will be required and disclosure shall be given, because here it requires an outflow of economic resources. But let's say if there is a possible obligation, in that case there is no provision, only contingent liability, given that the probably will not require an outflow of resources. The outflow of resources is not here. But let's say if the possibility of outflow of economic resources is remote, in that case no provision is recognized, and as I mentioned earlier, contingent liability shall also not be disclosed here. This is in reference to the second point. So this was a case-to-case scenario given here. Now this covers contingent liabilities and provisions. Now we are moving to contingent asset, and it is similar to contingent liability. See, again here will not recognize the asset, will only disclose it. It arises from unplanned or the other unexpected events which will give rise to inflow of economic benefits. In case of contingent liabilities, we had an outflow of economic benefits. And contingent assets are not recognized because they may result in recognition of income which is never realized. Because it is contingent, because it depends on the occurrence or non-occurrence of event, it is not recognized until and unless the event actually occurs. And when the realization is virtually certain, in that case the related asset is not a contingent asset and recognition is appropriate. See, virtually certain, we used the word earlier also. So if the conditions change and if the facts which were not known earlier become virtually certain, in that case a contingent liability or a contingent asset may actually have to be realized in the books, recognized in the books. So in case of contingent liability, we might have to make an actual provision in our book for a liability, and in case of contingent asset, we might have to actually recognize an asset in our books. And contingent asset is to be disclosed, and again the continuous assessment part is here because for the change in conditions for which we might have to actually recognize an asset. And this is again a similar chart whereby because of past events there is a possible asset, and if there is virtual certainty is there, then contingent asset is not recognized, instead an actual asset is recognized. And if virtual certainty is not there, then no actual asset but only a contingent asset with disclosures. And if the inflow is not probable, that is the inflow is remote in condition, in that case neither an actual asset nor a contingent asset is required. So in all the cases we are using the word virtually certain, so I marked this box as important. It is telling us what is the actual probability of each of these certainties. So in case of virtually certain, 95%, greater than 95% probability is required. So in case of virtual certainty, provision and actual assets are recognized. But if 50 to 95% is there, then it is not virtually certain, it is only probable. So in case of definition of provisions, we cover the word that it should be probable that outflow of economic resources should be from the entity, and because the word probable was used, we will recognize a provision. But in case of contingent asset and contingent liability, no word of probable was used, and therefore we only disclose the contingent asset. See, in case of, when I talk about the credit side, we have provisions, we have contingent liabilities. But when I talk of the debit side, we have contingent asset but nothing contrasting to the provision part. So in that case we have only actual asset, and for actual asset we do not see the probability part, we only see the virtually certain part. And therefore in case it is probable, then we only have the contingent asset and no actual asset, as compared to the credit side where we have the provision and not the contingent liability. Now if it is 5 to 50%, therefore we say it is possible but it is not probable. In that case we will recognize will disclose a contingent liability but will not disclose a contingent asset, and if it is removed then nothing is required. So the distinction part is this second and third box. Now I will cover illustration 4. X Sugars Limited has entered into a sale contract of 3 crore rupees with Y Chocolates for supply of sugar. As per the contract, delivery is to be made within 2 months, and if there is a failure, then 30 lakh has to be paid by X to Y. And now during the transit, the vehicle carrying the sugar met accident and X lost its entire consignment. And therefore, if it has lost its consignment, then it will not be able to deliver within 2 months. Therefore, it will have to pay the compensation of 30 lakhs. However, it has taken an insurance policy for the stock, and insurance says that it will pay the amount is collectible subject to deductible clause 15% of the claim. Therefore, the insurance company will pay only the 85%. Now, insurance companies do not pay you on the basis of sale value, they pay you on the basis of cost of inventory. Therefore, the cost of inventory here is given 2.5 crores. Meanwhile, Y Chocolates has made a demand of 30 lakhs. So what provisions would be made? So here there are two things. Firstly, X Limited has to deal with the insurance company, and secondly, X Limited has to deal with the Y Limited. So when I talk about the insurance company, X Limited will get 2.5 crores, 85%. So because it is getting 85%, therefore 2 crore 12 lakh 50,000 would be receivable by X Limited, but it is recognized as a contingent asset. Why has it why has it identified the amount receivable from insurance company as contingent asset? The reason here is, see, the question says that before the financial year, X Sugars received informal information from the insurance company that the claim has been processed and payment has been dispatched. So there is no formal information. Therefore, the amount is actually only probable and not virtually certain. Therefore, we are recognizing a contingent asset for the receivable, and for the amount payable to Y Chocolates, that is of 30 lakh rupees, we will make a provision because the amount is a present obligation arising out of past event. There is a probable outflow of economic resources, and we have to we can reliably measure the outflow of economic resources at the amount of 30 lakh rupees. So there is a contingent asset and there is a provision. Before moving on, let us just recap of what we have covered till now. Then you might take a 2-minute break if you want. So 2.1, as I remember, was the objective of Ind AS 37, which we went through. 2.2 was scope, which we covered through the chart, where we covered executory and onerous contracts. So executory Ind AS 37 is not applicable, and under 2.3 we covered various definitions, which also included the definition of onerous contracts, which Ind AS 37 is applicable. Then 2.4 was nothing but then extension of the definitions, and same for 2.5. Both were the extensions of our definition part.
2.6, which we just now completed, was a major topic, recognition, under which we covered recognition of 2.6.1 provisions, 2.6.2 contingent liabilities and 2.6.3 contingent assets. And under provisions we covered in depth all the 4 components of provisions. So now we will move on to the part measurement of Ind AS 37. So measurement is using various terms like best estimate, present value, expected disposal, future events, risk and uncertainty. So let's cover each of the topic individually. First topic is best estimate. So as I told you, best estimate, reliable estimate is nothing but there are various range of estimates like 0.25 probability, 0.75 probability, and they'll give values corresponding to those probabilities and we'll have to take a probability weighted average. Basically those kind of questions are the best estimate questions. So we'll directly jump to the illustration. Illustration 5 says that if there is a minor defect we'll pay 1 million, if there is a major defect we'll pay 4 million, and if there is no defect we'll pay nothing. So 75% chances as there is no defect, so 75% of 0, 20% minor defect, that is 20% of 1 million, and 5% major defect, that is 5% of 4 million. So our expected value of cost of repairs is 4 lakh rupees. This is the best estimate. See, it's pretty simple. Now where there is a single obligation is being measured, individual most likely outcome may be the best estimate. These are question to question basis, and whenever the question is given we can identify ourselves that how to calculate the best estimate, just like we did right now in illustration 5. The provision should be measured before tax, as tax consequences are dealt with under Ind AS 12. So because Ind AS 12 deals with how to deal with the provision part, therefore when we are talking in the ambit of Ind AS 37 we do not have to be bothered by the tax part. So we have covered the first, best estimate. Second is risk and uncertainty. So risk means nothing but the variability of outcome, and risk adjustment may increase the amount at which liability is measured. So what is risk adjustment? See, whenever we are recognizing a provision, let's say the amount we have to pay is over a period of 3 years, and because they are over a period of 3 years, for each year I have a certain outflow. That outflow I have to estimate, and then I have to bring it to the present value to recognize an amount of provision as of today. So there are 3 components. First is we'll estimate the future outflow. Second, we'll estimate a discounting rate, and then we'll bring that future outflow to the present value. So we can risk adjust any of these things. We can either risk adjust the future outflows we have to pay, or we can risk adjust the discounting rate we are using, or we can risk adjust the present value which we have derived by discounting the future outflows. So risk adjustment can be made in any of these points, and it might increase our provision amount, our liability amount. So why are we using the term present value here? As I mentioned, that in certain cases we might have to pay over a number of years, and the effect of time value might be material. See, if it is immaterial, then there is no need to bring it to the present value, but if it is material, then the present value of the expenditure is to be brought, because in case of Ind AS, the most important term is fair value, and whatever we do we have to stick to the concept of fair value, which says that we have to recognize it as of today, and whatever will be the difference will be nothing but our borrowing cost. As I will tell you later, it will be covered under Ind AS 23 borrowing cost. So as I mentioned that if the amount is not material, then it does not require to discount us, and the discount rate should be pre-tax rate that reflects current market assessment of time value of money and risk specific to the liability. Very good, although the discount rate shall be given in the question. Now let's do illustration 6. X Solar Power Limited, a power company, has a present obligation to dismantle its plant after 35 years of useful life. X Solar Power Limited cannot cancel this obligation or transfer to third party. Therefore, future course of action will not avoid the liability. Therefore, we might have to recognize a provision for the same. X Solar Power has estimated the total cost of dismantling to be 50 lakh, present value is 30 lakhs. Now it considers a risk factor of 5%, and where do we have to adjust this risk factor? The risk that actual outflows will be more than the expected present value. So whatever will be our expected present value, we'll have to increase those to reflect the actual outflows. Therefore, we'll not use that amount of 50 lakhs, rather we'll use 30 lakhs and we'll increase it by 5%, 31,50,000 to represent our actual outflows for X Solar Power Limited, and it will recognize 31,50,000 in its books as an obligation. Now the next topic is of future events. So future events that may affect the amount required to settle an obligation should be reflected in the amount of a provision where there is sufficient objective evidence that they will occur. So if there is any future event and we have a sufficient objective evidence that it will occur, only in that case we might be required to make a provision for it, and for that we should for the sufficient objective evidence we should either have a technical qualified objective observers. Now for possible new legislation, as I covered earlier, there should be a virtual certainty of the legislation being enacted, and only in that case we can recognize a provision for that. Covering illustration 7, X Chemicals Limited engaged in chemical industries again causes environmental damage by dumping waste in river. It does not clean up because there is no legislation. As at March 31, 2000 X2, the state legislature has passed a path-breaking legislation. It has passed the legislation. Therefore, it is virtually certain that the legislation is enacted, and therefore all the factories are required to clean up the water, and because there is a virtual certainty, a provision shall be required. So X Limited shall have to make a provision because there is a virtual certainty of the law being enacted. And the last part under the measurement is of expected disposal of asset. So if there is an expected disposal of asset, so the gains from that should not be taken into account while measuring provisions, because it will reduce the provision amount and it will not be a clear representation of what the liabilities are there of the entity, because entity might not actually realize the amount it is expecting from the disposal of the asset. Therefore, we do not take it into account. Now 2.8 is a good important topic, I think, reimbursement. Now, as I gave you the example earlier, I have a warranty obligation because I have sold phones to you. Now, if I take any corresponding insurance against that warranty, so if there is any obligation to me, that will be covered by the insurer. Therefore, I will get a reimbursement for any obligation I have towards you. So therefore, I can have a reimbursement condition. And if I am virtually certain that the insurer will provide me with reimbursement, I can recognize the reimbursement as a separate asset in my balance sheet, and I can net the amount in my profit and loss account. I'll cover this again. The reimbursement amount should not exceed the amount of provision. Let's say if I've sold a phone to you for 15,000 and if the phone is not working, I have a warranty obligation to replace the phone worth rupees 15,000. And if I have an insurance against it, then the insurance amount, the reimbursement amount cannot exceed 15,000 in my books. So the reimbursement should not exceed the amount of provision, first case. Secondly, the reimbursement should be virtually certain. I should be sure that the insurer will reimburse me the 15,000 rupees. Only then I can recognize it in my balance sheet as a separate asset. And in my PL, I can net the reimbursement amount with the amount of provision I am recognizing. So the provision of warranty 15,000 can be netted off with the reimbursement amount of 15,000, resulting in a nil provision. So in case of balance sheet, we are showing it as a separate asset, but in case of PL, we are netting it off. The reason is that in case of balance sheet, we wanted to depict a clear picture what is my liability and what is my asset. But in case of PL, let's once think whether the reimbursement amount is my income. It is not my income. So if I show the provision in its fullest amount in my expenditure and the reimbursement in my income, it will inflate my income as well as my expenditure. Therefore, we are netting it off so as to show the actual provision, actual outflow I will have to pay out. That is the actual expenditure on warranty that the entity will incur. Now, these 2 points are similar in nature. Entity will remain liable if the third party failed to pay for any reason. See, simple, if the insurer is not paying me the 15,000 rupees for warranty, that does not mean that I will not pay the 15,000 rupees to you, or I will not replace the phone which I have sold to you. My liability to you is separate from the insurer's liability to me. Therefore, it is saying that the separate asset is recognized only when it is virtually certain, and if it is not virtually certain, then I am liable to pay you whatever the warranty amount is there, whatever the warranty obligations are there. And in case an entity is jointly and severally liable, then a contingent liability is recognized for other entities' part, as we covered earlier. Now this is again a summary type of table for reimbursements. See, if the entity has no obligation to be reimbursed by some other party, then there is no need of recognizing any reimbursement asset. But if the entity is to be reimbursed and there is a virtual certainty, in that case a separate asset is recognized in PL, a net amount is recognized, a separate asset is recognized in balance sheet, a net amount is recognized in PL, and the provision and the reimbursement amount shall not exceed the provision liability. Also, the reimbursement is disclosed together with the amount recognized for reimbursement. So disclosure and recognition both are done. But if there is no virtual certainty, asset is not recognized, only the expected reimbursement is disclosed, because the reimbursement can then be termed as a contingent asset for us. So we'll move on to illustration 8. X Beauty Solutions is selling cosmetic products under brand name B, getting manufactured from Y Limited. So if there is any injury or harm, so Y Limited will reimburse X to the extent of 30%. And if there is a claim for 30 lakhs, so how will it be treated? So it is very simple. In the balance sheet, we'll recognize an asset of 30 lakhs fully as a separate asset, and in the PL we net off, we'll recognize 30 lakhs minus 30% of 30 lakhs, that is 21 lakhs in our PL, after netting off with the reimbursement asset or the reimbursement right. So this covers our reimbursement topic, which was, I think, testable in exams. Now next topic is of change in provisions. So change in provisions, Ind AS 37 says that at the end of each reporting period we should review it whether a provision requires reversal. Why will a reversal be required? If the probability of outflow of resources ceases to exist, in that case we'll not recognize a provision. And if the discounting is used, as I mentioned earlier, present value might be taken in certain cases where the outflow is spread over a number of years. So if we are using discounting, then what we will do is each year we'll unwind the discount. As I have covered in the video of decommissioning liability of question 6 of Test Your Knowledge Ind AS 16, the word unwinding of discount is used. So whenever we are discounting an amount and we later on each year unwind the discount, the unwinding of discount is nothing but the borrowing cost under Ind AS 23, and this is depicted in the illustration 9, which we'll cover right now. X Telecom Limited has income tax litigation pending before appellate authorities. Legal advisors say that it will lose the case and estimate a liability of 1 crore rupees arising in 2 years. Discount rate is 10%, period is 2 years. So we'll discount 1 crore by 10% for 2 years. We'll get 82,70,000. This is a rounded off figure by SCI. The actual figure will be a bit lesser than 82,70,000. Then after 1 year, we'll unwind the discount. So there are two ways of unwinding the discount. What ICI has done is it has unwinded by again calculating for 1 year in the next case. Otherwise, what we can do is, if we discount for 2 years in actual without rounding off, we get the amount of 82,64,463 rupees. 82,64,463 rupees as the present value for 2 years. Now after the expiry of 1 year, we can simply calculate the discount unwinding of discount by multiplying it with 10%, which will give us 8,26,446 rupees as the borrowing cost. So 8,26,446 should be the actual figure, but because of rounding off, ICI is recognizing only 8,20,000 rupees as borrowing cost in the first year. And similarly, it will do for the second year. Now use of provisions. So it says that provision should be set off with only that expenditure for which the provision was originally created. A simple example would be, my provision for warranty should not be set off with my income tax expenditure. So that was a simple example of this point. 2.11 says application of recognition and measurement rules. So first topic is future operating losses. See, the future operating losses will be occurred in the future. They do not depend on any past event, and because they do not depend on any past event, therefore no provision can be made for the future operating losses. So in illustration 10 says X Packaging Limited has two segments, packaging division and paper division. In March 11, the board of directors approved and announced a formal plan to sell the paper division. In June 2011, operating losses were 50 lakhs during the period April to the expected date of disposal. Now management wants to include this amount in the provision for restructuring. Can X Limited include the operating losses in provision for restructuring? So the answer is it cannot include these future operating losses in provision, even though it leads to losses related to disposal group because of the above reason that it is not arising out of a past event. So the answer is Ind AS 37 prohibits the recognition of future operating losses. Now onerous contracts, the theory part we had covered earlier, it is repetitive here. This point is very important for onerous contracts. See, onerous contracts are those contracts in which the unavoidable cost of meeting the obligation exceeds the economic benefits to be received from the contract. So the unavoidable cost means lower of the cost of fulfilling it, that is lower of the cost of either satisfying the contract or the penalties arising from failure to fulfill it. So we'll do the example to understand this. X Metals has entered into a non-cancelable lease. See, non-cancelable is hinting at onerous contract because if it is non-cancelable, that means there will be a penalty to cancel the contract. So it is a contract. X Limited has entered into a contract to purchase from Y Limited 10,000 units at 50 rupees, that is 5 lakh rupees worth of products. Now if X Limited denies such a purchase, then it will have to pay 60,000 to Y Limited. X Limited has discontinued manufacturing. For that, X Metals has identified a third party to whom it can sell the said raw material at 45 rupees per unit. So see, X Limited has discontinued operations. Now it has either two options. It can exit the contract or it can enter the it can satisfy the contract, purchase materials from Y and resell it to some other person at 45 rupees. So if X Limited is reselling it, then it is buying at the rate of 50 and selling at the rate of 45. That is, it will have a loss of 5 rupees on 10,000 units, that is a loss of 50,000 rupees. Or on the other hand, it can pay 60,000 rupees to exit. So the unavoidable cost will be lower of 50,000, that is the cost of fulfilling the obligation, or 60,000, that is the cost of avoiding the contract. Though therefore the lower amount is 50,000, so X Limited will recognize a provision of 50,000 because this is a case of onerous contract on which Ind AS 37 is applicable. Now we are moving on to the end of the topic, restructuring. The following are examples of events that may fall under the definition of restructuring. First is sale or termination of line of business, or closure of business location, or relocation or change in management structure, or fundamental reorganization that have material effect. So this topic is being covered because of provision for restructuring cost. So provision for restructuring cost is just like any other provision, therefore it should meet the general recognition criteria. That means there should be the four components. There should be a present obligation, there should be a past event, there should be probable outflow of economic resources, and the outflow can be measured reliably. Now again here a constructive obligation to restructure definition is given. So constructive obligation will again arise when there is a detailed formal plan and there is a valid expectation in the mind of users. So this 5 point gives the example of detailed formal plan, which you can see for yourself, and there are some certain examples. Now here it is saying that for formal plan for an user to understand that there is a restructuring plan, there should be certain evidence. So for example, dismantling of plant or selling of assets may provide us with an evidence that the entity is trying to restructure. And for valid expectation, the important point is of time frame. See, if the entity is going to restructure within the end of this year or in a recent period, then we can say that there is a valid expectation in the mind of users. But if an entity is saying that it will restructure over a period of 7 years, 5 years, or later on whenever, that cannot be termed as a valid expectation. This means that valid expectation is related to the time frame of restructuring, time frame of commitment. A management or board decision to restructure taken before the end of reporting period does not give rise to constructive obligation at the end of reporting period unless their entity has started to implement and has announced the main features. A mere board disclosure is not enough. There should be the implementation should have started and the main feature should be announced, because we want to create a valid expectation in the mind of the users. Also, if the entity starts to implement the restructuring plan after the reporting period, we'll use Ind AS 10 to understand whether such an restructuring plan is material or non-material. If it is material, then we might have to make a provision for the restructuring cost, and if it is not material, we might have to disclose it, because the non-disclosure might affect the economic decisions of the end users of the financial statements. Also, till now we have moved in a sequence that we are saying that firstly there should be a detailed formal plan, then there should be a valid expectation in the mind of the users. The contrary might happen, where there is already a valid expectation in the mind of users, only a formal plan needs to be chalked out. So for example, if entity wants to revise the wage of the employees, and the entity has already discussed with the employees, so there is a valid expectation in the mind of the employees that there will be a wage revision. Now the only thing pending is the board approval. So if the board approves, then we can immediately recognize the provision, because valid expectation already exists. The only thing pending was the detailed formal plan, which has been chalked out after the board approval. So I'll explain this point in a simple tone. If there is a case of wage restructuring and certain employees are themselves in the board, so if the board is discussing the wage revision and it has not been officially communicated to employees, but because the employees are already on the board, it is known to them. So the valid expectation is created there itself in the board, and also as soon as the board approves the plan, the detailed formal restructuring plan is also approved. So in this unique case, the ultimate authority as well as the valid expectation lies with the same authority, the same party, and therefore only one decision will lead to satisfaction of both the conditions. Also, it says that no obligation arises unless there is a binding sale agreement. Then these points say what should be included and what should not be included. So the direct expenditure which are necessarily required for restructuring and not associated with the ongoing activities are included in the restructuring cost. Therefore, it shall be counted for the provision of restructuring cost. But any cost which are not included, which are not required for the restructuring but are associated with the functioning of the organization, for example staff cost, marketing or investment, they shall not be included in the provision for restructuring cost. See, a simple example would be, for example, when Satyam was acquired by Tech Mahindra, so Tech Mahindra also took over certain employees of Satyam, and there were certain other restructuring costs, for example legal fees and all. See, the legal fees would not be otherwise incurred if the restructuring was not to be taken, and the legal fees was also not incurred after restructuring happened. But when I talk about the employee cost was incurred even after the restructuring was completed, because the employees were transferred to Tech Mahindra. So in that case, the employee cost was not recognized, but the legal cost for restructuring was recognized under the provision for restructuring cost. Now, gains on disposal of assets we have covered earlier shall not be included. Now, illustration 12, you can read for yourselves. There was a detailed formal plan and meetings were also held to create the valid expectation, and therefore both the conditions are satisfied. So a constructive obligation is there and therefore a provision shall be made. Now, disclosure part, as you all know, I do not cover. I'll cover the illustration 13 for warranties. This is a drafting of a note. I am not sure whether such questions will come, but anyhow you just give it a read once. It is a very easy question. And last topic is 2.13 levies, which we'll cover now. So levies means any liability to pay a sum of money to government basically. So what is a levy? It is a charge imposed by government on entities in accordance with laws and regulations, but it does not include those which are under Ind AS. For example, income tax is covered under Ind AS 12, therefore it will not be a levy for the purpose of Ind AS 37, or other fines and penalties which are imposed for breaches of legislation. See, the legislation implies penalty, but the breach of legislation cannot be covered under a levy. For example, I'll give you a simple point. Let's say equalization levy. So equalization levy will be considered as a levy because it is not for a breach, but it is rather for the sale by a digital company in India. So equalization levy can constitute a levy, but if I say that the non-filing of return constitutes certain penalty, that cannot be considered as a levy because it is for a breach of contract or a breach of legislation. payment to the government for acquiring asset or rendering services as per contractual agreement. So for example, AGR dues cannot be considered as levy because it was for the spectrum, that is the SUC, spectrum usage charges. Therefore, for acquiring asset or for using asset, the payment made cannot be considered levy. And liabilities that arise from emission trading schemes. So for emission trading schemes, for example, CO2 emission trading schemes, etc., in that case also whatever payment is made cannot be recognized as a levy. So basically any payment other than all these four, if it is levied by the government under any law or regulation, can be covered under the levy. Now why are we studying levy? Because if any activity triggers the payment of levy, it will be considered as an obligating event. So if it is considered as an obligating event, it might give a rise to a liability to pay levy, and therefore we might have to recognize a provision for the same. So what Appendix C? See, this is not covered under Ind AS 37 specifically, but under an appendix of the Ind AS 37. So Appendix C says that the accounting for a liability to pay a levy, if that liability is within the scope of Ind AS 37, or the accounting for a liability to pay a levy whose timing and amount is certain. See, if the timing and amount is uncertain, in that case it will be covered as a provision and not a liability. So the timing and amount should be certain for it to be recognized as a liability. So for this I will cover the examples for a better understanding. See, if the obligating event is the generation of revenue over a period of time, the corresponding liability is recognized as the entity generates the revenue. So liability is recognized as and when the obligating event occurs. So if the obligating event is generation of revenue and revenue is generated, then the corresponding liability will also be recognized. Similarly, if the obligating event occurs when a minimum activity threshold is reached, then if the minimum threshold activity is reached, then the liability will also be recognized. So this was basically that as soon as the obligating event is reached, recognize the liability for the same. Now this point is in context of Ind AS 34 interim financial reports. It says that if in the interim financial reports, entity shall follow the same principles as it is following in case of annual financial statements. Entity shall not recognize any liability to pay a levy if there is no present obligation in the current interim reporting period. See, if I talk about interim reporting period, it might be quarterly. So if the obligation to pay the levy will arise in the third quarter, I will not have to recognize the liability in the first quarter itself. I'll recognize it in the third quarter when the obligating event will occur. And similarly, the liability will not be shall be recognized if a present obligation exists at the end of the interim period. So in the first quarter I will not recognize because the obligating event did not occur, but in the third quarter I will recognize if the obligating event occurred in the third quarter. An entity shall recognize an asset if it has prepaid a levy. See, if a levy is prepaid, then it is obviously an asset for us, and if it was not paid, then we were recognizing a liability for the same. So asset or liability, whatever it is, we'll have to recognize for a levy. Again, I do not think levy will be asked in the exams. So this completes our topic, I think, yes. And test your knowledge questions, just try them out once. They were also easy and a bit theoretical. So Ind AS 37 does not involve too many questions. And on that note, I'll end this video. It was pretty long, but anyhow, we've covered it finally.